Greetings and good vibes. This is Erika with another Q and Q. And again, Q and Q means questions and queries. All right, we're going to jump right in. I've got a bunch of questions to get through, so let's just see what kind of fun I have in store for me today. What are the key skills needed for successful multicam live show directing? Wow, we're jumping right in on a difficult question. Directing experience, for one. I know that might sound silly, but if you haven't directed at all, there's no possible way you're going to be able to direct multiple people. And obviously, some of that directing, although I have a theater background and I switched into film and television, that experience really needs to be with a camera. If you've just done theater directing, yeah, I think you're still going to struggle to do anything with a lot of cameras, camera operators, people doing live edits. Like that whole thing is going to be way too much. So, experience in directing and at least experience filming with multiple cameras, even if you're not used to talking to a lot of different operators at the same time, as long as you have some understanding of what it looks like to see multiple cameras at once, you at least have a head start. So experience, patience. And I mean, patience is a huge, huge one. You do not want to get frustrated with your crew. You don't want to get frustrated with your operators. You don't want to get frustrated with any of the technical people, because if you do, their performance is going to suffer, and you are definitely going to put that onto the performers as well. So lots and lots and lots of patience. Communication, but more than communication is clear communication. You want to get across whatever your point is with the least amount of words and the least potential for confusion. So I'm going to just go with those three. I could probably go on for a while, but those three things are pretty major. Let's see what else we have in here. How do you ensure that the show's content is engaging and relevant for the audience? There's a school of thought which I frequently follow, which I wouldn't say is the best way of approaching it, is I don't necessarily always care what the audience thinks. I think if the people who are doing it are having fun and really enjoying what they're doing, most of the time the audience is going to like it. But I think you definitely need to take the audience's feelings into consideration. That feedback can come back through social media. That feedback can come back through, you can literally just ask people. If it's a live project and people are in the audience, you can chat with people, find out what they think of it. You can put out questionnaires or anything of that sort, asking people questions at the end of the show, or it could be something that you send to them to find out afterwards. But yeah, I would say in today's age, especially if it's an indie type thing, just asking wherever you're posting it, whether that's YouTube, TikTok, social media, asking people, and really, and even if you're not asking, just really listening to what the comments are. You can chase your audience, try to make content that fits what an audience wants, or you can just make what you love and hopefully know that the people that want to find you will find you. That's a little bit riskier, but certainly are people that do that sort of thing. What's your approach to managing live show rehearsals and run-throughs? In short, I want the rehearsals to be as close to what the show is actually going to be. I want the lighting to be right. I want the camera operators and the actual cameras in their exact positions. There's no point in doing a rehearsal if you just sort of set up your camera wherever and you just want to run through it. No, I want to see the cameras on the screen with all the different angles. I want to make sure everything looks right. I want to make sure the white balance is good. I want to make sure the camera operators are comfortable. I want to make sure the sound is ready to go. No point in doing a rehearsal if the sound person isn't there or they aren't ready, because you're gonna have to do everything again, because if the sound is bad, people will not watch it. So yeah, I want it to be as close. That's my approach. I want it to be as close to the real thing as possible for performers and technical people. How do you balance creative vision with practical constraints during a live show? That is something I deal with. I think is probably one of the things that I deal with the absolute most, especially working on indie stuff, is you never have the full budget you want. You never have all the people you want. You probably don't have the location you want. And so you're constantly having to adjust the amazing thing you would love to do with the reality of what's sitting right in front of you. And some people can get a little bogged down by the restraints and the limitations. Some people will make the most creative decisions they ever make in their life because their back is up against a wall and they have to figure out what's going to work best with what they have literally right there in front of them. So I like to see constraints as an opportunity to do something really, really fun. Occasionally it's frustrating. You want to do, a car chase scene and you can't do it. You have to figure out another way around that. But if there's something that is absolutely integral to what you're doing, then you need to budget for that. If you need to do a car chase scene, what other parts of the budget can you maybe bring down a little bit or make adjustments to if that's the one thing that you're going to spend a lot of money on? Also, don't do that at the end of the shoot. Do not wait until the last day because it's totally going to fall apart. Make sure you do that early enough in the shoot where if something doesn't work, you have time to deal with it later. But yeah, to me, constraints means let's figure out something as creative as possible, as interesting as possible. Do something with the cameras, do something with the performers, do something with the location. Like find a way of doing something great, even if you can't necessarily do the thing that you had hoped to do from the beginning. What's your process for evaluating and improving the show after it airs? I wonder if that means the edit or if that means improve the show for the next episode. If it's for the edit, then working with the editor, working with the producers, if there's any kind of writers, just chatting about stuff going through, listening to the audience. I do a lot of comedy shows. If it's a comedy show, the audience doesn't laugh, you need to make an adjustment because something isn't working. Yeah, I think that's probably what it's asking about is the overall show. Does the tone work? Is there a logical through line? And I don't mean through line like is there a theme for the show, but I mean does one segment go nicely into the next segment? Are people rushed at some point? If you have a host or an MC, do they have enough time to move around? Is all the technical stuff working? Did you have 3 cameras that all had nearly the same angle and you realize you need to adjust the cameras afterwards? I don't know if I necessarily have a process, but you really need to go through a whole bunch of stuff. Often you have to watch, at least for me, I mean, I don't watch it a lot, but you might have to watch it 2 or 3 times, whatever your final product was, in case you've missed things the first time around. But after you've done this a while, you start noticing, you can notice the costumes and the lights and the cameras and some kind of technical video thing. You can catch all of those on 1 or 2 viewings, so you don't have to watch it a lot. But yeah, I don't think I have a process, but you can tell by the audience, you can tell by the vibe, you can tell a lot of times you can tell in the room when things are working and when things are not working. How do you ensure that all camera operators are aligned with your vision for the show? Oh, that's an interesting one. Sometimes, not always, sometimes the camera operators have no idea what's going on. They don't know what your vision is and they're just there doing a job. If they're just there doing a job, you need to make sure they're comfortable. They have at least a fair idea of what they're doing. If you've got one person who's doing nothing but close-ups, make sure they know that. Make sure they've got a good camera, some kind of good follow focus where they can adjust things that are going on. Make sure they know what's going on. I don't necessarily think they need to know what your vision is for the show, especially if there's someone who was hired last minute, someone who's filling in. They might not know anything about what your vision for the show is, but definitely make sure they have some idea of what's going on, what they're filming, what they're supposed to be following. If you've got a show where you're doing a lot of slam focuses, where you're moving focus in and out, make sure that they know that, and definitely make sure they do that in the practice so they can get used to doing it. So yeah, make sure give them as much information as you can. That will be helpful. If you've got 10 minutes to talk to them before the show, do not spend 9.5 of those minutes talking about what you've done for the last 3 years. And we wanted to build this show because, none of that matters. If you've only got 10 minutes, make sure that they know in those 10 minutes the general style of what they're doing, make sure they know what to film, make sure they have a little bit of a rehearsal, make sure they can talk to the other camera operator so that they at least have some idea of what they're doing for the show. I don't think they necessarily need to actually know what your vision is, like big picture. How do you handle live interruptions during the show? That would depend on what the interruption is. If the interruption is, the fire alarm's going off, you're gonna have to pause because one, it's a safety thing. If everybody has to evacuate the building, then you have to evacuate the building. If immediately you find out it's not a real drill, something accidental happened, you may still need to pause if the sirens are going off because you can't hear what's going on. So it depends on what the interruption is. If it's something that literally impedes the performers, the technical people, or the audience from either doing their roles or watching the show, you're gonna have to pause or stop or make some kind of an adjustment. If it's a person who's heckling, if you've got any kind of security and you want them removed, just make sure that they're removed. If it's someone who's being slightly annoying, if you've got a really good host or MC and you think they can chat the person out of being annoying from the audience, do that. If the interruption is, a light on stage burned out, which happened to me in a show I was in, I don't know, maybe 6, 8 months ago, one of the lights on stage burned out. It if you were staring at it, you would have noticed it. If you weren't staring at it, you wouldn't have noticed it. So when someone brought it to my attention, I looked at the monitor, I looked at all the different cameras, saw what it looked like, and I said, we're just going to leave it. So you're not going to notice it in the edit. It's so subtle. I mean, the light had a purpose, like there was a reason it was there, but it wasn't important enough to stop the show, have somebody go out, either change the bulb, move any of the light instruments around. None of that was important. So yeah, it's really a big question as to how much it's going to impede the show itself. How do you ensure that all cameras are in sync and capturing the action effectively? For me, that huge change happened when I started using the Blackmagic ATEMs. I used one of the 4-slot ones a couple of times, and then I got an 8-slot one, and I don't have to ensure that they're all in sync. I can literally see that they're all in sync because I put up the multi-view and I'll watch all 3, 4, 5, up to 8 cameras simultaneously. I can literally see them all. I can tell, especially if it's a Blackmagic camera that's plugged into it, we can adjust, the ISO, we can adjust the frame rate, we can adjust the color, we can adjust all of that right there from the deck. I prefer not doing that. I would prefer to have the camera operator do it, but it's nice having the ability if something weird is happening with the camera, again, especially if it's the Blackmagics. But the fact that we put everything into the ATEM, I don't have to do anything to ensure that. I can literally see if they're working. And we do some HDMIs straight into the board, and I've also been doing a fair amount of wireless HDMIs, and there is just the tiniest bit of delay, but that delay has never affected anything that was going on where it was causing any kind of a problem. It's such a small amount that I don't have any issues with it. The hardest thing to make sure is right is the audio. And so I only have 1 or 2 different audio sources that are actually being recorded in the board. Everything else, when I say board, I mean the ATEM itself. The only times I've ever had issues with sync problems is when I've allowed multiple cameras throughout the room, when I've allowed them to input their audio signal into the board. And that's when I've had problems, when you've got multiple audio signals, because even if you've got very short HDMI cables plugged into them, there's always going to be weird delays, and then you're getting audio echoes. And the moment that happens, again, audiences hate that. It's just going to sound terrible. So I like to make sure that the cameras are recording the audio internally, but actually going into the ATEM. And if we're doing just a record, or if we're doing a record and a live stream, I will only have 1 or 2 microphones, maybe a couple more if they're going into the same audio recorder. Generally only 1 or 2 microphones capturing everything going straight into the board. That way I don't have to worry about audio sync issues, because audio sync issues are really annoying. How do you prepare for potential technical difficulties or equipment failures? I mean, I don't know if you can prepare for equipment failures other than having backups of things. So rehearsing things, making sure the technical people know what they're doing, and really having backups. And the irritating thing about backups is the more backups you have, the more gear you have to carry. The heavier everything is, the more stuff of it there that you have. And it just gets so messy when you have extra gear. So if I'm in a new space, I'll bring a lot of extra stuff. If I'm in a space I've been in many times before, I know who my operators are. I know who the person, the vision swisher that's sitting at the board. If I know everybody, it's in a space, I'll limit the amount of extra stuff that I'll bring with. And if I know that there's stuff in the theater, if that could be power cables, that could be TVs or monitors, extension cables, like whatever we might need. If I know some of it's going to be there, I'll just not bring it with because I know I'm going to be able to find it. But really having backups, having an experienced crew, and keeping things as simple as possible is the best way to deal with that. What's your strategy for setting up camera angles and positions? My strategy is experiment. I like experimenting. I like trying different things. I like having a mix where whenever I can, obviously I can't always do it. I like having close-ups, mediums, wide shots. I like high cameras in the back of the stage where it's pointing out towards the audience. So you can see the performers, like the back of their heads on stage, and you can see the audience laughing. I also like really severe side angles. So anytime I can put cameras in the wings, doesn't really matter which wing it is, but if I can put a camera where it's cutting across, and that way you can see people when they're walking forwards and they're walking back, and you can really see what's going on that way. So I really like that as well. I don't know. And also elevation. I mentioned the high camera in the back. The side cameras I usually keep around eye level. The cameras that are out in the audience, I actually prefer them to be at eye level or even higher. I prefer the angle looking down slightly. When you have a camera below a person that's looking up, you get this weird, people, that's not a very flattering angle having the camera pointed up. So if it's in front, I want it at eye level or a little bit higher. And then I really like putting one or two cameras on the floor. That could be on the floor in one of the front corners, pointed up towards the performers, or that could be at the back of the theater on the floor, pointed out, where you can see a little bit of the audience on the ground, but you're getting this really intense high view upwards of the performers walking around on stage. So I guess my answer is I like variety. Close up, medium, wide, different elevations, different angles. I like to throw in a black and white camera here and there. You can do that in post if you just decide afterwards you want to pull out the saturation. I like setting up a black and white camera because I want to make sure it's going to look exactly how I want the black and white to look afterwards. But I like that just because I think it kind of adds a little bit of a different dimension to what you're looking at. But for me, it's variety, it's having fun, it's playing around. And it's picking good cameras that you can match in post. If you don't happen to have 2, 4, 8, whatever it is, cameras that are all identical to each other. How do you handle live audience interactions or reactions? Audience interactions. I have to assume does that mean talking to the audience? Handle live audience. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's talking to the audience. I would assume that's mostly going to be the host/MC, but I do a lot of stuff with improv, and there's a lot of times that the improv people will ask the audience directly questions, most of the time to do with their improv, whatever they want to do next. Musicians, if clapping, getting the audience to stand up, shouting things back at them. I mean, there's audience interactions that way. I love all that stuff. So when I'm running something, I always tell whoever the performers are, have fun with that. Like, make it your own. Whatever you want to do, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever interaction you want to have with the audience, go for it. Like, have fun. Like, really let your personality shine. That's what I tend to say to the performers that are on stage. Audience reactions? Oh, I mean, does that just mean laughing? I mean, laughing means we're doing a good job. Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what audience reactions means, if it's anything other than laughing or responding, because heckling isn't really a reaction. If you know what audience reaction means, write it down below and I'll try to figure out who asked that question to see if I can give a better answer next time around. How does your experience in theater inform the way you direct film and vice versa? Hugely, 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 hugely affects the way I do everything in film. And I've been doing this for a long time, and every single person I've ever interacted with that was a film director that has never done live stuff or never done theater, we think very different from each other. Theater, there's quite a lot of differences, but the two biggest differences, I would say, number one, a theater performer, theater director, whatever word you want to put in front of theater people understand the entirety of whatever the piece is. Whether it's a musical or a straight play or whatever it is, whatever the performance is, they know everything completely locked inside their head from the moment the show starts all the way through to the end. They know what all of the arcs are. They know where the comedy is. They know where the drama is. They know where the scene changes are and how they need to approach the scene in order for two scenes down to have the payoff to whatever they're doing in this scene. They get the big picture. And I don't mean that as a cliche. I mean, literally, they come in, they know the whole thing from beginning to end, and they can play all those tiny little beats throughout the whole thing from beginning to end. Film actors, and obviously there's actors that do both, film actors really understand singular moments because that's literally what you're filming. You're filming just a singular moment. So you get out of bed that day, you come into work, and you know you're doing a page and a half. And for that day, you need to be able to nail whatever's happening in that page and a half. If the character is, has a hangover and they just woke up, that is what you're playing for that page and a half, is this person who's, feels like death. They just had an awful, or maybe, they had a wonderful night, but they're having an awful waking up moment. You just need to be able to nail the moment from saying action to the moment saying cut. You just have to be able to nail whatever you're doing in that moment. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a great handle on the whole story. You definitely should, but not everybody does. You just have to be able to nail singular moments as they're happening throughout the whole show. And for me, same thing with directing. If I'm directing it, I know every single up and down, and I know when it gets loud and when it gets quiet, because you build all of that variety in the rehearsals so that when it comes to showtime, everybody is just following the roadmap that you've already made. The roadmap changes a little bit depending on, audience reaction to stuff, but you have the whole thing and you know intimately where every single little bit is versus just nailing one little tiny thing at a time. Yeah, I think that's it. How do you manage time constraints and keeping the show on schedule? If you're working on a film production, you have a good first AD. If you're working on some kind of, television or broadcast, you have a good, floor manager or whoever else it is that's keeping stuff on schedule. And if you're doing theater, you have a good stage manager. End of answer. I jokingly say those three people are the person who walks around on stage with the web. All right. 3 minutes from now, everybody, 3 minutes from now, get on stage in costume, be ready to go. Like, they're the ones who do that. So you don't want to be the director and having to do that. You want another person who's watching the time, who's calling people, who's giving people, however many minutes out, if it's 15, 10, 5, 1, like whatever the numbers are, that's everybody's preference, doesn't matter. But you have someone who is doing that. You do not want it to be the director because they've got too many things going on. And when I'm a stage manager and I'm helping somebody else direct, I'm more than happy to keep everything on schedule. But it's the person who's keeping everything on track. That's the person who's doing all of that. As far as constraints go, if you're running up against the time, if you're the director and you've got whatever, again, TV, film, theater, whatever it is, you have that person telling you, we need to move on to the next thing in 17 minutes. The time that it's most important that they tell you that is when they know that there's multiple things you wanted to do, and now you've only got 17 minutes. So as far as managing, that's when it comes down to you as the director. You need to decide what is it that you absolutely have to get done in the next 17 minutes. And are there a couple things that you wanted to rehearse in person that you can just explain verbally and hope that people get? And what is it that you absolutely have to run through? If it's a technical thing, if it's some kind of a lighting change, you're probably going to have to do that. You're not going to be able to, skip that part. But if it's normally we have you come in from, stage right, this time come in from stage left. Or if it's a film thing, the last time we were talking about you holding your mug the whole time. This time I just want you to put your mug down in the middle. That's the sort of thing that you can probably get away just telling them verbally. Rehearsing it is obviously better, but there's when you're having to manage time constraints in that way, you have to be able to make the right decision. What do you absolutely have to get done in the time that you have, and what can you, explain or do in some other way? Have you done any 48-hour film festivals? How did the film turn out? I've done 3, I want to say 3. They're interesting, I think is my answer. The first one I did, I was in DC, and I can't even remember exactly how it happened, but they have been going on for years. I hadn't done one. I have been in DC and wanting to get a bit more into the indie film scene. And I don't remember where I was, but I came across a post of a group that was like, hey, we're going to do the 48-hour this year. We want more people to join. Oh, wait, no, it was some kind of a mixer. I went to some kind of a film mixer, and there was a bunch of people there, and I was just walking around, just kind of scouting the place out, seeing if there was a fun group of people that I'd met, be like, hey, I'm looking for a team. I'm happy to join. And that is the first time that I met Degon, or Daniel Gonzalez, for anybody who doesn't know who Degon is, and had no idea who he was. He said he had a group of people. They were doing a 48-hour. I think they had done 1 or 2 prior to that, but he had a great crew, and they were looking for a director, which is one of the strangest situations I've been in, because most of the time people just go, oh, I'm a film director, when they have no idea how to be a film director. So I was genuinely shocked to hear a team was looking for a director, and I have a lot of directing experience. And I said, oh yeah, I'm a director. I've done this, this, and this. And I just kind of listed some things up, and he went, great, you're our director. And I was like, absolutely, completely floored. Never expected that to happen at all. So I just was suddenly this team's director. Hadn't done a 48-hour before. Just met him at this mixer, but we had a great rapport pretty much immediately, and it seemed like a lot of fun. I had met the team. I think a couple of them, I had met them once, like maybe a week or so before we, sat down and had dinner or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I met a few of the people. So I made sure I knew which positions we had covered, which positions we were still looking for. I knew who it was that was going to the theater to get, what is it? Is it a character name, a prop? And I'm forgetting, genre, I think is, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a few years since I've done one. I knew who it was that was doing that. I knew where we were filming. Well, we had, I think, 3 or 4 potential locations we could film at. So I made sure I was updated on all of that. And we just kind of waited until the night came. We got all of our information. I knew who it was that was writing the script. They were staying up. You get the information, I want to say, on a Friday evening, Friday night. And we knew that we were going to film, that they were going to stay up all night Friday night writing the script. First thing Saturday morning, we were going to film when we were going to film the entire day. And then Saturday night, like late Saturday night, the people doing post-production were going to get all the footage, and they were going to stay up all night and then turn it in on Sunday. That's the plan that we were going to do. When I saw the script first thing Saturday morning, I had a couple of comments. I thought that there's just a couple of really subtle things that we can change to make the script a whole lot better. And they took the script, kind of redid it a little bit for an hour or so. I was like, this is great. We should jump into it. And we just literally jumped into it with this whole crew, this whole cast, all these people I did not know whatsoever. And it was absolutely a fantastic day. I made sure everybody had a say in what was going on. I made sure the performers were having a great time. I made sure the technical people weren't getting overworked. If somebody had an idea, I was like, yep, that sounds fantastic. Let's do it the way it's written, and then we'll do the thing that you just said. I made sure everybody, had, at least some kind of comments like, oh, let's try this, let's try that. And I was constantly saying, does anybody have a great idea before we move on? I made sure everybody had, a chance at least to say, let's try this, let's try that. And I made sure everything stayed on schedule, on time. Everybody had a great time. Couple of really fun things, especially once I was in the room, because I didn't even see the locations before it was chosen. Um, Once you see the location, you look around like, oh, that's great. Let's film that angle. Let's film that angle. Let's put a second camera there. Let's make sure the microphones are doing this so we catch that. And anytime we were in a new location, we were filming in a really large apartment building. So there was this gathering place that we sort of turned to make it look a little bit like a bar. We were in the fitness area, which we made look a bit like a gym. We filmed inside somebody's apartment. We filmed in a couple of the hallways. I don't think we filmed in the business center, but I think we film on the roof? I think we may have filmed on the roof of the building. So we had all these different locations inside this one building. And every time we'd go to a new location, I go, great, that's fantastic. We're going to film with that. Even if it doesn't fit the script, I'm going to make a slight adjustment in the script because that looks great. And I want to make sure we capture that on film. So it was just very much a thinking, thinking on my feet right off the top of my head, trying to make everything look as good as possible. And editors got it that night, had everything ready to go, submitted it the following day, and it ended up being shortlisted for best film at that festival, which completely floored me. I was not expecting that at all, and there was a massive, massive amount of films that were submitted because there's a lot of film from Discovery and a bunch of other places. There's a lot of film groups, a lot of film businesses, a lot of film stuff inside the DC area. So it was absolutely floored that we were able to get shortlisted. I don't think we won anything, but we were on the short list of best films, which was pretty fantastic. I did it one more year, the year after that. Didn't go quite as good the second time. I think we had less people and also a lot less experienced people. And then I did it once when I was in Atlanta, and it went okay. It was again a crew that didn't have quite as much of experience, and I was just there helping out. I forget if I was a PA or camera operator, or I'm sorry, PA or AC or something like that. I just kind of was like, hey, I'm happy to help. I don't need to do anything super important. Actually, I think I did a fourth one. I did a fourth one where I think I was just a stills photographer. I was only available for a few hours, so technically, I think I've done four. What's the key to a strong director-actor relationship? Well, saying communication is extremely cliche. I would say I don't think I would necessarily say that they have to agree at all times, but I would say they have to be willing to listen to what the other person says and be willing to try things and to have some fun and to really just figure out what's going to work, because how you assume, whether you're the director or the writer or the performer, how you assume something is going to happen isn't necessarily the way that it happens. So as long as you're willing to be flexible, have conversations, as I said just a few moments ago, I like to film things the way that they're written. So film it the way that it's written, and once we've nailed it, let's do something goofy now. Let's try something different. Let's do something different with the character. Let's have them, get up and walk around. Like, let's do some kind of a detour. It's not something that changes the whole course of the film, but let's really play around with it and see if there's some other little angle that we can find that's fun, that's exciting, that's depressing, like whatever it is that we're looking for. Let's try to find a slightly different angle from what we think is really going on. How do you ensure that the story remains engaging in a medium like an audiobook where visual storytelling is absent? Short answer is good actor. That's really it. And someone who's reading, performer, actor, in this case, it's the same thing. It's really down to that one person doing an amazing job. They could be speaking in one voice, or they could be speaking in 117 different characters. That part doesn't really matter. But they have to be engaging. They have to have, unlike me, I tend to get a little monotone if I talk too long. They have to have a lot of variation in their voice. They need to be able to really set up because every time you go, such and such said, like every time you have to say the character's name to let you know who is speaking, if you have to do that every single time, that means the performer isn't doing a good enough job. They should be able to start speaking as a character and you instantly know who it is that's speaking because they're putting a strong character behind each of the different characters. None of the characters can sound like each other unless that's a deliberate choice. But generally, none of the characters should sound like each other. They should all have, be in a slightly different register in the performer's voice. They should have slightly different cadences. There needs to be a lot of variety. And that really comes down to the performer. Occasionally, you can have a performer that doesn't have a lot of experience. And if you have a really good director and or producer, depending on how many people are in the booth listening, you have a really good whoever the supporting person is, they can certainly help with a performer that doesn't have a lot of experience. But to me, really hands down, it absolutely just comes down to you really need to have a good performer. How do you decide which projects to take on, especially when you work in so many different formats? If I think it's going to be fun is probably my number one, and then my number two. So this is an easy thing for me to answer. So number one is fun. Number two is it something that I've been wanting to try that I haven't done before? Number of years ago, I hadn't worked on anything comic book related, but I really wanted to. I had taken a number of classes, watched a lot of stuff on YouTube, and then I came across this post of this person who was wanted to start doing comic books specifically to help support the Black community. I'm mixed race. I'm a bit on the light side, but I'm mixed race, and that's something that I work a lot in that space. And I said, hey, I don't have a lot of experience, but I do a fair amount of graphic design, so I do understand the visual design of comic books a little bit. I learned a whole lot more in that next year after I joined the project. I was like, I understand it a little bit. I also have a lot of directing experience, a lot of theater experience, a lot of film experience, and a lot of that, and which also doing things like storyboards. So a lot of my experience and a lot of writing experience. All of that stuff crosses over into comics, but I don't have a lot of experience with myself. We had conversations a number of times and decided, yeah, this is a great thing. And then I just joined the project and ended up being one of the head writers for a considerable amount of time, helping setting up the project, getting it off the ground, bringing in a crew. So if it's something that I've never done before that I really want to do, that's probably the second way to get me to sit down and say yes to something, just because I think it's going to be fun. And another thing is when I'm in, I'm totally in, and I love being totally in. So I'm an easy audience as far as that goes. That's the last question. Thank you so much. All the contact information is down below. If you have any questions you want me to go through, anything you want me to chat about, please drop it down below, and I look forward to answering any other questions that I have. Thank you for joining me today at Creator Shift.